Either way, the Gypsy's gonna give Steve a reading, which is just full of optimism. Then she's gonna do the same for Al and Peggy. Marcy doesn't want to partake because she doesn't believe in it, but they convince her to do it anyway. And naturally, she gets the bad fortune. You know, the typical bad things are gonna happen to you.
Misfortune, betrayal, disaster, tragedy. But those words could mean anything. Oh.
Welcome back to another episode of The Rank. I'm John, and today we're going to be ranking the next episode of Married with Children. Now, for those of you who are new to the show, I'm just going to give you a brief agenda here. We start with the potent notables, which are just some interesting facts or tidbits that I found out about the episode or series. Then I go into the episode overview, which is where I talk about everything that happened in the episode, so spoiler alert. And then I do the rank, where I rank the episode in 5 categories on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best, all to find out what are the best sitcoms of all time. And today we're going to be ranking the 8th episode of the 3rd season of Married with Children, called The Gypsy Cried, written by Richard Gurman and directed by Jerry Cohen. All right, let's find out how this one stacked up, starting with the potent notables.
Potent notables.
So this episode aired Sunday, February 5th, 1989. Married with Children keeps climbing, going from a 10.4 rating to a 10.9. Now, for the second potent notable, I've actually been reading a book by Richard Gurman, who wrote this episode. It's called Married with Children versus the World. And he has the chapters separated by seasons. And the opening line for season 3 was, Season 3 of Married with Children was to the family sitcom what the Godfather trilogy was to the gangster film. Except Married had more senseless violence, gratuitous sex, and a less sympathetic family. I don't know how much of a potent notable that is, but I really enjoyed it, so I wanted to share. There you go. That brings us to the episode overview. Now, we open this episode with an odd sight. The Bundys actually have food. Al and Peggy are carrying platters full of food into the house. Naturally, one can only assume that they're stolen. And as it turns out, the assumption didn't make an ass out of us. They'd stolen it from the party that Marcy and Steve were having across the street for their banker friends. They say that Steve and Marcy throw a nice party, and then they land the punchline of, it would have been even nicer if they had invited us. So basically they went over uninvited and stole their food. It's funny to me that they're talking about how nice the party was, and then immediately they start complaining about everything about the party. Like Al says he didn't like the bankers because they kept staring at him. Though, in their defense, Peggy says you did overflow the toilet and not tell anybody. And of course, Al's like, well, I do that at home and I don't tell anybody. Besides that, he was trying to liven the party up, not with the overflowing toilet. But according to Peggy, Al's version of livening up the party is to stand on the buffet and yell, hey, let's wet the wives' t-shirts and rate their hooters. Which is just insane. But the best part is that he then turns to Peggy and says, you would have won. And she's like, aw. So here's the thing. If that doesn't work for you, this show is not for you. That's the kind of stuff that just makes me love it. But Marcy's going to show up soon after this, and she's going to be like, hey, I need those platters of food back. The party's starting. So what does that mean was happening when Al and Peggy were over there stealing the food? I'm not sure, but Al doesn't want to give the food back, so he sneezes on it. But then Marcy says, fine, you need it more than I do, clearly. And so then she sneezes on it too. Now, this is all very gross, but I have to say, Marcy, well done. Then Kelly and Bud come in with a big can of gas, and they're like, hey, we siphoned off the gas like you told us to. And Kelly starts jabbering about it, saying, can you believe all this gas came from one Rolls Royce? But then Marcy sticks her head up over the counter, showing that she's there, right? Kelly starts trying to cover. Now, I know the show is always telling us how stupid Kelly is, but her trying to cover here was pretty quick thinking. She's like, wouldn't you know it? One of the cars sprung a leak, and we thought it was a fire hazard, so we cleaned it up. Then the icing on the cake is Bud saying, damn vandals, I think they keyed the cars too. Regardless of the quick thinking though, Marcy's gonna grab the gas cans and look back at Peggy pleadingly and just be like, please talk to them, as in scold your children. So then Peggy gives a real stern warning. You know the speech, you did a bad thing, don't do it anymore. But Steve's going to show up shortly after this for no reason other than to get the plot started. His arrival is actually going to prompt the fortune teller that he hired for the party to cross the street as well. Why? Well, because she saw both the roads across the street and thought, they're going to skimp out on paying me. I mean, it's pretty flimsy, but flimsier still is that they all decide to now have their fortunes read in the Bundys' house. Fox must have really been scrimping the set budget on this show. We had one episode where we saw the Rhodes' house and just never again. Either way, the Gypsy's gonna give Steve a reading, which is just full of optimism. Then she's gonna do the same for Al and Peggy. Marcy doesn't want to partake because she doesn't believe in it, but they convince her to do it anyway. And naturally, she gets the bad fortune. You know, the typical bad things are gonna happen to you.
Misfortune, betrayal, disaster, tragedy. But those words could mean anything.
Oh.
Of course, the good fortunes start to pan out. Peggy's first when some guy shows up at the door to return Al's wallet that he apparently left in the mall parking lot. Peggy checks the wallet and then takes the cash out and puts it in her bra. But Peggy in her fortune was told to expect a windfall. And this is what she's considering is a windfall. Though it feels like she's really narrowing the definition. If found shoe salesman's wallet is a windfall to her. Now, Marcy's actually in the house with Peggy, and she's starting to get worried now. But Peggy's gonna reassure her. She's like, "You're the luckiest person I know." And as she says that, a black cat walks past Marcy, which is just such a fun and goofy joke. Next is Al, though. He's gonna show up and say the fortune teller had mentioned green, so he went to the racetrack and bet on a horse that had green in its name and won $200. This, of course, makes Marcy more nervous, but Peggy's like, "Don't worry, she went into the most detail with Steve." Now, in the fortune for Steve, she had said that somebody was gonna die and he was gonna inherit something good. And she's like, "Hey, and nobody's died yet." But right after she says that, Steve shows up and says, "Guess who just kicked the bucket?" It was the guy with the best parking spot at the bank. Now, he's got the best parking spot at the bank. He always said Steve would get that spot over his dead body. So this is when they all look at Marcy, and Al's gonna be like, maybe it's not safe to have her in the house. And then Peggy and Al sort of look at Steve, and Steve's like, "Don't look at me, I don't want her in my house either." But Steve's got good news for Marcy. Mr. Vandergelder, I think it's their boss, but her boss definitely, is giving some banking keynote speech, and he wants her there with him. Now, this is a big deal for her career, so she's excited, but then she finds out it's in New York City the next night at 7 p.m. How's she gonna get there? Well, she'll have to fly. So she becomes convinced that something bad is gonna happen on the flight. So she refuses to go. And Steve's like, stop being weird. Just get the tickets and maybe some insurance. The insurance line actually gives Marcy an idea. As insurance, she's gonna get tickets for Steve, Al, and Peggy, and they're all gonna go with her. Nothing bad is happening to them because of the fortunes. Therefore, nothing bad will happen to her, right? Now, never missing an opportunity, Al cajoles them into giving him and Peggy first class tickets, not coach. Now, just as an aside here, I've never flown first class, but I have always wanted to. Is there anybody else out there in that boat? Or anybody that used to be in that boat and have now flown first class? Was it all that us other people imagined it would be? Let me know in the comments. But this is when we get a great scene. The last act of the episode takes place in first class on an airplane. Al and Peg are just having the time of their life, making fun of people in coach, and just ignoring everything else but each other. It's so funny with the show because the premise is that Al and Peggy rag on each other all the time. But isn't it just so satisfying when they're just enjoying each other's company? Marcy, on the other hand, is freaking out. On top of her death concern is that her boss, Mr. Vandergelder, is a giant asshole. He's on the flight with his mistress girlfriend, Fluffy, who is blonde, big-breasted, and vapid, as this show seems to think that all young women are. And to prove this point, just in case the audience is thinking, oh, she's not stupid, they have Marcy ask how she's doing, and she responds,
Am I doing what?
Well, she ain't the sharpest crane in the box.
As it starts its descent into New York, the plane starts hitting some turbulence. So we end up overhearing the pilot on the intercom, which he thinks is off, saying they're going down and they're going to die. And since she's going to die anyway, Marcy decides she's gonna punch her boss. The punch actually knocks him out, and I love that they have this little bit where they show Fluffy just stealing his money while he's knocked out. Of course, they don't end up crashing, and Marcy's now worried that she just cost herself her career. Not to worry though, because Steve is going to recommend blackmail. I love that there's not a single character on this show that isn't morally corrupt in some way. But we end the episode with a close-up of Peggy and Al drunkenly singing together and enjoying each other's company, which was a lot of fun. Well, it was a fun episode. Let's find out how it ranked.
Oh, wait.
So the rank is where I rank the episode based on 5 categories: story, acting, dialogue, episode coherence, and character relatability. I rank it on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. And then I have a laugh counter where I tally up the amount of times the episode made me laugh out loud. 1 point per laugh out loud gets added to the score. But before I dive into the rankings here, I just want to say if you're enjoying this episode, please leave a like down below. It really does help me out. But without further ado, the first category is story. The story is that the Bundys and the Rhodeses happen to see a fortune teller, and then the things that she said seemingly start start to come true. It's not necessarily a terrible story, but it's not much of a story either. It's kind of a concept more than a story, really. So I gave it a 2.25. So that brings us to acting, and the acting was good from the main cast and sort of decent from everybody else. Nobody was bad, but nobody was particularly great. So I gave it a 3.5. That brings us to dialogue. Now, in spite of the poor story, I thought the episode was really funny. Everything happened in sort of a silly way, but that's kind of what you have to expect from Married with Children. But I really enjoyed that it wasn't all I hate my wife, I hate my husband jokes. I gave it a 4.5. So that brings us to episode coherence. And this is a goofy episode. It's very, this happened, then this happened, then this happened. The decision making in it is kind of silly, and it just didn't feel like the most coherent thing. And as far as characters go, I really enjoyed seeing Al and Peggy be nice to each other. These are the moments and ways where they continue to show where Al and Peggy enjoy each other and agree with one another. So I think that was really good coherence. I went with a 3.5. So that brings us to character relatability. And while I'm not a believer in fortune telling, I don't think it's unrelatable for people to get caught up in their fortunes. Obviously, they take it to an extreme, but that's where the comedy is. Also, the way the Bundys were acting in the first class, while hilarious, was a little beyond the pale. I gave it a 4.25. So a little bit up and down rankings here. A decent laugh counter will still keep it in the top 3 tiers though, and Married with Children usually does make me laugh, and this time it got me 18 times. So that puts the episode total at a 36, which makes it a holy grail. For the series, the average is at a 33.6, which keeps it as an I'd watch it again. And if you're ranking along with me, drop your scores in the comments, especially the laugh counter. I am really curious to find out how often people laugh at these episodes. But thanks for listening and or watching. Check out my other Married with Children episodes or any of my other sitcom or movie episodes. Remember to subscribe, comment, and like. For full up-to-date rankings, you can check that out on the website at therankpodcast.com, or you can also email me at john@therankpodcast.com. If you want to become a patron, you can do that at our Patreon site at patreon.com/therankpodcast. But I will leave you with this. What we didn't see was that punching him wasn't the only thing Marcy did to her boss. By the time she was done with him, he had to change his name. He goes by Mr. Vander Gelding now.
What?
Classic castration joke.
Move this man!
What you're about to see may disturb you.
Now the plane is going to start hitting turbulence as it starts its descent. Now the plane is going to hit some turbulence as it starts its
Cause I'm a moron.
The plane is going to hit some turbulence as it starts its descent. I keep wanting to say defense.
It's just
The plane hits some turbulence as it starts its I can't. The plane hits some turbulence as it starts its descent. I can't.
what is wrong?
The plane hits some turbulence as it starts its Okay. The story is that the I can't talk cause I'm a moron.